King and a Court of Fools by H. Ryan. Written by Larry Enright and read by Larry Enright. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. Puddle, puddle, toil and trouble. Puddles were the best. Better than a bag of army men, better than the anthill behind the garage, and even better than that giant cardboard box the refrigerator came in. Maybe they didn't come with men in 6 different shooting positions, or tickle when they crawled over your finger, or have room enough for all 5 of us to pile into and slide down the hill. But they had one thing none of those others had. They were more than just a toy. When we left for school the next day, it was drizzling. Mom had us all dressed in raincoats and galoshes. A little rain wasn't going to stop us. We could walk to school in the pouring rain, through 10 feet of snow, through heat and freezing cold, and do it uphill both ways. Just ask Tom. The sky's thick gray blanket hadn't moved much since last night, but with the morning it was finally pushing slowly eastward. Far off to the west, clouds were breaking up into the promise of a clear afternoon. In the aftermath of the storm, our side yard had become a vast lake, stretching from the house to the woods. It spilled over the curb into the street, feeding a raging river that ran from the woods to the corner, ending in a waterfall at the storm drain. Sam kicked at a pile of mud and debris that had formed a dam across the river. Water from the widening puddle behind it spilled over the top, eating away at the wall, holding it back. Tom retrieved one of our special bricks from the garage. We'd been collecting bricks from the Shannons' house while it was under construction, and hid most of them in the woods to use when we built our fort. The few specials we'd found were kept stashed in the garage. They were special because they had 3 holes in them. "Perfect," Tom said, wedging it into the dam. "Just like the Hoover Dam." Water poured through the holes in 3 streams, allowing the puddle to drain. Kate produced a rectangle of cardboard from her school bag and covered the holes. "There, now it's a real floodgate. We can open and close it whenever we want." Sam brought more mud from the Ioli's side of the street and packed it into the dam. "We should hook wires up to it and make electricity to run the lights in the house." We all agreed that this was a good idea. Dad was always looking for ways to save money. Tom began planning the operation. "We'll need wire from the Shannons, and we should bury it so it doesn't get mowed over or ripped out by you-know-who. We'll connect it up in the basement." The constraints of time and what adults call reality have very little place in the imagination of kids. But every once in a while, reality intrudes and time runs out. "Stupid school!" Sam dropped another load of mud onto the dam wall. "The river will be gone by the time we get home." It was a good idea, but we abandoned it. While we waited at the corner for our friends, I constructed a magnificent ship out of a leaf, loaded its cargo of precious sticks into the hold, and sailed it down the treacherous river of doom. It was called that because no boats had ever made it past the giant monster that lived in it. 3 times the leaf ship tried valiantly to get by, and 3 times the monster stomped so hard with its giant red feet that the waves carried the tiny ship out of the river and into the lake. On its 4th and final try, the giant capsized it, sending its crew and cargo to Davy Jones' locker forever. The other Caswells arrived while we were building a second dam downriver at the waterfall. The plan was to release the water from both dams at once and see if we could overflow the storm drain. Big Bob snuck up behind me and lifted me into the air. "Are you Mrs. Pauls? Huh? Are you?" "Bib Bog, let me down." "Mrs. Pauls, yes or no?" He popped me up into the air and twirled me around so I was facing him. I squeezed his nose with one hand and squeezed mine with the other. "I'm not Mrs. Pauls, Bib Bog." Big Bob opened his mouth wide. Then I'm going to have to throw you back. He lifted me higher. I screamed. Mom called to us from the front door. Time for school, kids. You don't want to be late. We waved to her and headed out. Just like always, she watched us until we were out of sight. And just like always, that's when we stopped and put on our pirate caps. After we'd safely crossed Connor Road, Tom started right in with our favorite rainy day game. Puddle, puddle, toil and trouble, fire burns and water bubbles. He took off down the street, heading for the first puddle. It was a small one, and he jumped it easily. We waited for him to call the first two contestants. Those were the rules. Puddle, puddle, toil and trouble. Braithwaite Burns and Bobby Bubbles. Bobby Fay bolted for the puddle, and Braithwaite tore after him. Bobby made it to the puddle without getting tagged and jumped it. That meant Braithwaite had to run through the water and put out the fire. He screamed as he did, and we all screamed too, as it splashed everywhere. I jumped in the puddle just for good measure. Tom headed for the next one. Puddle, puddle, toil and trouble. He waited for the previous contestants to call the next into the game. That's how it worked. Braithwaite called out, "Sam Burns!" And Bobby shouted, "And Big Bob Bubbles!" Big Bob was big, not fast. Sam caught him easily. That meant Big Bob was out. That's how we got to school on puddle days. But when we played Puddle Puddle, we didn't go by Frankie Mark's house. It wasn't that the puddles were any better going another way, because there were some pretty good ones at the foot of Hasty Road. Puddle Puddle was a fast game, and stopping at Frankie's would have ruined it. Tom was always thinking one step ahead. That's why he was the king. Puddle after puddle, we got to within a block of St. Catherine's, and only Mary and Kate were left. Tom ran for the stop sign and the huge puddle that flooded the intersection. Mary and Kate followed together, not knowing who would be fire. Tom always called the last one. The rest of us kept pace, except Big Bob, who had been carrying me piggyback for the last two puddles. Tom called it out and veered off the sidewalk into the grass to give them room. Mary was fire. Kate ran, and Mary chased after her. There was a patrol boy on the corner. He turned and put his hand up for us to stop. It was Frankie Marks, standing there in his neatly pressed pants, blue rain jacket, and black penny loafers with a shiny new dime in each. Kate pulled up next to the puddle, and Mary caught and tagged her. They argued. Not fair. He made me stop. Yes, it was. That's part of the game. Frankie looked past them down the street, and this funny look came over his face. Not a smile, but something like a smile. He stepped back, way back, keeping his hand up for them to wait. Tom saw what was going on and ran for them. He reached the girls and got between them and the street, opening his raincoat wide just before a car plowed through the puddle, sending a tidal wave of water over them. Tom got soaked, but the girls not so much. Frankie was gone. The school bell rang, signaling the start of classes in 10 minutes. Tom should have gone home. Even Kate agreed with that, but he didn't. He went into school, wet and miserable. At recess, I found him with the others at the edge of the playground, where the asphalt was all broken, and there were mountains of dirt with grass growing out of the tops. The drizzle had stopped. Tom had dried off. He was reading to everyone from a composition book, something that sounded like a homework assignment. They were all laughing. I pulled on Tom's sleeve and pointed at someone coming our way. It was Frankie. "Give it back, Ryan!" He was mad. The others stood between Tom and Frankie, blocking his path. Tom closed the book. "Give what back?" "Don't play dumb. Give me my book back." "Or what?" "Or I'll tell on you, that's what." "Okay, come and get it." Tom held it out for him to take. Frankie glared at the others, then at Tom. Tom waved everyone back with the book. Let him through. He never took his eyes off Frankie, and Frankie never took his eyes off Tom. They were having a staring contest. When a path opened for Frankie, he took a step and reached for the book. But it was a much longer step than he expected, and he lurched forward into the deep, muddy puddle between Tom and the gang. He stumbled and fell to one knee before regaining his balance. When he stood up again, one pant leg was soaked and muddied up to his knee, and he'd left a black penny loafer with a shiny new dime stuck in the mud. Tom held the composition book in front of Frankie's face to read. See, it says Ryan, which makes it mine. Maybe you left yours in the coat room on the floor by the water fountain. We left Frankie yelling and screaming loud enough to attract Sister John Ann and went back inside to our separate afternoons. I was looking forward to Mrs. Baxter reading us a story, and the glass of milk afterwards, and the oatmeal cookie, and a nap. Maybe she would read us one about puddles. Puddles were the best.